Hey, hey, mamas. Welcome back to another amazing episode of the Mama Work It podcast. So excited you're here. My name is Marissa Lonick. I am the founder of Mama Work It, where we support women in the juggle of mom life, work life, wife life, fill in the blank life. And I'm excited, you guys. We have a very special guest today. Her name is Stacy Orsborn. She is the co-founder and president of Fitness for Victress Movement. She's the creator of Victress Movement's first of its kind training methodology, now used in all Victress locations. Stacy has a deep understanding and passion for supporting the ever-changing needs of female physiology. Her credentials include ACE orthopedic specialist, ACE certified personal trainer, GGS1 coach, GGS menopause specialist, DONA birth doula training, dynamic neuromuscular stabilization exercise. Oh my gosh, so much. Stacy's strength training programs, they cater to women in all stages of life, from young adult, prenatal, postpartum, and menopause, providing a supportive community and medical-backed fitness training to help all Victress women feel strong and empowered. We're talking all things postpartum fitness today. Stacy, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited. I was able to listen to some of your content that you've been pumping out. I just feel like all these things align so well. So thank you, Marissa. Thank you for having me today. I'm super excited to chat.
Thank you. That is so kind of you. Okay. Well, Stacy, I always love to ask, tell us just a little bit more about like your background in motherhood and fitness. Like, how did this all happen for you?
Yeah, I think that's always like an interesting question because I think a lot of people that like do something or create something, it's usually founded in some kind of life-changing event for themselves or someone else or all of those different things around them. I'm a mom of three. I have three boys, ages 16, 14, and 7. I am super busy with all of their stuff, all of their things. So when you were talking about all things mom, like, yeah, it's like a wide gamut of hats that I put on throughout a day. That's for sure. But when it comes to Victress Movement and what we have started there, I was pregnant with my third. Very long story, try to make it short. Pregnant with my third, I was doing some strength training at a local gym here in Lincoln, Nebraska. And I got pregnant and I was like, okay, I went to my coach. I'm like, what do I do? Like, what should I do different? Or how should I approach my training different? And, I just kind of got that like deer in the headlights look back. Like, I don't know. And then my, midwife at the time was like, just keep doing what you're doing. And if you know anything about like that style of fitness, I was doing CrossFit at the time. It just didn't feel appropriate for what at that stage of life. And so doing what I had been doing didn't necessarily resonate with me. I'm very intuitive in regards to like the way that I move my body and what I feel like my body needs from day to day. And that just did not align really well with what I felt like was best for me at that stage of life. So I really dove into all the things, tried to learn as much as possible for myself, for my birth, for my recovery, for my postpartum journey, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, more in depth. But yeah, that's where it started. And then after going through that experience with so much more intention and so much more focus, I just felt like a different person. I felt like the other side of that experience opened up so many doors for me personally, from the way that I felt about my self confidence, from the way I felt about my own autonomy, my ability to advocate for myself, my ability to do hard things. Like all of these things just really transformed me. And I was like, well, if I could pass this on to like one more woman, just even one more woman, I feel like that would make a difference. Like I think that so many things in our lives could be changed by feeling those sense of empowerment that experience and movement, intentional movement has given me. And so that's where it started. I met my business partner. She was one of my clients and we started this thing and she does the business and I've done the fitness. And now we've got we're set to open 5 locations here by the end of the year. So yeah, we're excited.
Wow. Love
Yeah.
that. I'm curious, was fitness always a part of your life, even before this story that you shared, or, had this evolved or changed during that season?
It was not actually. I grew up in a pretty conservative upbringing, not in a negative way, just that I, at the time, like PE, certain like activities in PE, girls weren't allowed to do at my school. There was just like a little bit of like an umbrella of like how much girls could really participate in. And it just wasn't really a big value, in my upbringing in regards to like movement, and health was always there. My dad was always active my whole life, but I never felt like it was like an integral part of my life, until actually I was going through a divorce at the age of 23, and I started running, and that was like kind of my outlet and processing emotions and stress and like all of those things. And that's really where I fell in love with movement. Was I realized like I could process and feel and experience emotions in my life, and have this kind of like mind body connection through movement. So it really wasn't until I was in my like mid 20s, early 20s is when I actually got more into movement and the benefits of that.
And you were already a mom at that time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I was already a mom of two. I had my first when I was 21, and I had my second when I was 23. So yeah, I was already
Yeah.
a mom.
I'm glad I asked that because sometimes we look at people in the fitness world, and if we're not particularly like, if we don't think of ourselves as athletic or someone who, has an identity in exercise or fitness, we tend to look at people like you who are doing all these incredible things, have all these incredible certifications, and we're like, well, that's just not me. Like, I couldn't do that. But I
Mm.
love hearing that story because that wasn't always you. Like, you
No.
really, this evolved for you and in
Mhm.
like past the time where you had become a mom, not even prior to motherhood. So I'm so glad I asked that. And thank you for sharing with us.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, movement the birth of my third son is actually what triggered even more of that leaning into that process too. So, yeah, I think the limiting belief of like, this is the way I am for the rest of my life or whatever it may be, as moms, I think it's easy to get trapped in that. But if you allow sometimes like the process of giving birth and being a mom to help transform you too, I think that you can see some huge changes in your life.
Beautiful. Yeah. So let's talk about like the postpartum period. There's
Hmm.
there's still this thing out there of snapback culture. So
Hmm.
can you walk us through an ideal postpartum recovery timeline for one of our listeners, like maybe a working mom who wants to get back to just feeling strong?
Yeah, absolutely. You're right, Marissa. Like, absolutely. There is this bounce back culture, pre-baby body. I mean, I don't know how many moms like sit there on their phones and are like scrolling through old pictures of themselves and like, you know, envisioning themselves the way they used to be. And like, there's a loss process with that, right? Like there is an identity, there's a loss. Like you have to be able to like honor that and realize that that is a big part of becoming postpartum. But you're right, like our culture absolutely has this completely backwards. What we need to be doing for ourselves in an ideal working mom situation, ideally, hopefully you at least get 12 weeks off. That might look more like 6 weeks, depending on the situation, depending on, your employer and all of those things, which hopefully changes sometime in the future. But at 2 weeks, I say like laying in. So from birth to 2 weeks, like we're going to just like sit on the couch, snuggle your baby, um, do skin to skin. Hopefully, you have people in your corner that can show up with food and nourishment and love and support and sleep, and all of those things are things that we need to be focused on in those first 2 weeks. Usually at this point, ACOG has recommended a 2 week follow up visit with your doctor. So hopefully that's occurring. I still believe that most doctors are still not seeing moms until 6 weeks. But ideally, you're seeing somebody at the 2 week mark just to make sure you're doing okay, have that mental health evaluation that we all love and are familiar with if you've ever had a baby. Um, and at that point, getting up off the couch and starting to move around the house. It's hard with littles, if you're a second time mom, third time mom, fourth time mom, whatever it may be, it's hard to just like lay on the couch for 2 weeks. And I totally get that. But in an ideal world, that would be the scenario. And then at that 2-week mark, like I said, going to the doctor, maybe you schedule a pelvic floor therapy appointment at that point. Maybe you're starting to venture out for a baby wearing walk. Ideally avoiding strollers versus actually wearing baby, just for a postural positioning and your core integrity. When you're pushing a stroller, we see that kind of internal shoulder rotation and that like hunchback that just kind of happens normally postpartum because our cores aren't as strong as they used to be. They're still healing. And we're just in that hunched over position, whether we're breastfeeding or not bottle feeding, we're still like kind of internally rotated. And baby wearing can help your posture and strengthen your core and those types of things. So I say, like, if you're going to go for a walk, like let's try like a 20-minute baby wearing walk where you're holding baby high enough on your chest that you could like kiss the top of baby's head. And depending that still feels okay and you're not seeing an increase in your bleeding. So very common, obviously, after delivery to have vaginal bleeding, whether you've had a C-section or not, or a vaginal delivery, both are occurring. So as long as anything that you're doing as far as movement from the 2-week period forward, that's gentle, intentional, restorative, as long as it's not causing an increase in bleeding, I say that 2 to 4 week mark, you should be, good to go. And things should be, obviously, your body's responding accordingly to that stimulus in a way that feels good and nourishing and healing, and isn't going to set back the healing process. At about 4 weeks, depending on what type of delivery that you've had, if it's been, if it was a vaginal delivery, no tearing, no episiotomy, like no interventions in regards to, pelvic floor, like anything like that. Usually at the 4-week mark, we would say, okay, like maybe we start to incorporate some breathing patterns, some intentional core exercises that are appropriate, not like go do crunches or planks, like we're talking about rehabilitative, intentional breathing patterns, activating your transverse abdominal muscles. Like there's just a lot of other things. And unfortunately, a lot of doctors and fitness professionals don't really know what that means, nor know the resources for you. So that's what's cool about Victress is we have a postpartum workshop that starts ideally about 6-week mark to about 10 weeks. That ranges pending types of delivery and all of those things where you're coming back to movement with the intention of rehabilitating. So we're setting a really strong baseline for the rest of your life and setting you up for success for the rest of your life in that way. So we're focusing on your core, we're focusing on your posterior chain. So the mom butt that occurs that you've heard over the years, probably from like postpartum, like, oh, I've just like lost my butt. Like I don't have a butt anymore. Well, unfortunately, with the front loading of pregnancy, the hamstrings and glutes and low back muscles do have a tendency to get a little bit of amnesia if we're not intentionally bringing movement back to them. So we really focus on like reconnecting with your posterior chain, being able to feel those muscles again, and then working on thoracic mobility, so upper back mobility, getting some range of motion in there, also strengthening chest muscles and upper thoracic too. So we're playing like this, like move the body parts game in the postpartum recovery intentionally. But it should be slow. Like everything should be really slow. I think BirthFit has said out there, like slow is fast. Like the slower you can go and more intentional you are in your recovery in the postpartum time period, the faster you will feel the benefits of that process. I can't say you're going to feel like you used to feel because that doesn't exist anymore. You are no longer that person. And I don't really know a whole lot of moms that would say they want to go back and give up what they've gained from becoming a mom. It's just, it might look different, but that different doesn't mean worse. Different can also mean better if we're intentional about our healing process in the meantime. Sorry, that was like a lengthy answer, but yeah.
That was a great answer. I was like, wow, if I was in this postpartum period or pregnant right now, I would be taking vigorous notes. So
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
of course.
And I love how you really reference this as a healing journey, like a recovery plan, because I think we forget like birth can be very traumatic on the body. And like you said, a lot of times we're just kind of like, well, I used to do spinning, so I guess I'll go back to do spinning because I got cleared from the doctor or whatever it is. But that might not be the best way to sort of ease back into it, right? And I love how thoughtful and intentional this plan is.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, going back and doing what you were doing before may make sense at a certain point. It just may not make sense when the doctor just gives you that okay, right? Like, at 6 weeks, like if you've had a baby or, if you're pregnant or you're considering getting pregnant, I don't want to scare anybody, but like 6 weeks, you still feel, I remember feeling like my core was really hollow and like almost like echoey and like jello. Like nothing felt like maybe where it was supposed to be yet. So when I went into the doctor, especially with my first two, and he's like, okay, you're good to go do what you were doing. I wasn't really exercising throughout either one of those pregnancies or in between, but it still like, it felt very discouraging to like go back and expect my body to function the way that it functioned pre-pregnancy at 6 weeks postpartum. Like that's just completely unrealistic and not at all what women are experiencing. So bringing intention to that rehabilitative process is so important so that you can go back and feel performance wise, you can feel like you want to feel, based on whatever modality of movement you're choosing. Like you said, whether that's spin, running, weightlifting, like whatever it may be.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense. So what are some real creative ways, if you're a listener, you feel like you're just so busy, you're getting maybe back to work, or you're just kind of getting into this new normal now with a baby or a baby and a toddler at home or whatever this looks like for you? What are some creative ways that these busy moms can squeeze in workouts without necessarily sacrificing time with their babies or, hours they need to be putting in at work or whatever it is that's demanding of their time?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, well, there's two parts to the answer. I want to answer that in two different ways. First, I'll just answer the question in regards to best ways to like maximize your time, maximize your energy in the gym, like making time for yourself in that way. I think in my mind, and what I usually recommend is like what's going to get you the best bang for your buck in regards to, or to your time or your energy in regards to what types of workouts are you doing? Like what is going to benefit you to the maximum and really benefit you long term. So maybe you don't have to work out 4 days a week, 5 days a week. And obviously I'm biased. I'm going to say that's strength training without a doubt. So just strength training 2 times a week has been shown to increase metabolism, build muscle mass, decrease insulin resistance, like just so many different things to the benefits of strength training. So if you're able to go in and do 2 good, solid, intentional, appropriate strength training sessions, that's the equivalent of like doing potentially 4 or 5, maybe like moderate intensity workouts. So, setting aside 2 days of your week where you could get an hour to an hour and 15 minutes, maybe at a gym where you can do some intentional strength training, I think is probably one of the best ways that you can benefit yourself long term. And then just walks, right? Like we can always take our kids on walks with us. We can always set aside time, give yourself permission to set aside time to go on a walk by yourself or whatever it may be. Walking on the treadmill downstairs if you have access to one, or walking at the gym, like whatever it is. But walking has some of like the best benefits of movement as well. So I think for women, it's like they think that it needs to be every day, or they think that it needs to be like this super consistent, like daily thing. Do I move daily? Yes. But my type of movement looks different day to day. Sometimes that's yoga, sometimes that's walking, but strength training is absolutely where I'm going to invest my time and energy to make sure that I'm reaping the benefits of my goals and what I want for my life moving forward. So that's first answer to that question. The second answer to that would be, we have a lot of women that come in the gym and say like, I'm doing this for my kids. Like I want my kids to see me working out. I want my kids to see the benefits of exercise for myself, or I want to be around when I have my grandkids, or just like all of these external motivators attached to our identity as moms, or are attached to our identity as being better people for our children. And I like that. I like whatever gets you in the door, whatever gets you moving. But I think that at a certain point, we have to start to hold ourselves accountable to the fact that like we can do movement and we can take the time to take care of ourselves and exercise just because we deserve that. Like we deserve to be able to take care of our bodies, not for anybody else, not for anything else, but ourselves. And prioritizing ourselves in that way can feel selfish, and feel very blasphemous, I think, in so many different ways. But really, truly, I think it's how we show up as the best version of ourselves when we start to give ourselves permission to take care of ourselves only for ourselves. So that's my soapbox, like additional answer to that question.
Yeah. Thank you for saying it. I think there's not enough times we don't need to hear that. Like if you told me that every single day, I'd still soak it all in, because it's tough and being a mom is tough and we don't always do that. I mean, I always say like, we tend to put ourselves last on the to-do list and what happens to the last thing on your to-do list, like it doesn't get done. Right. So I think we need those consistent reminders. And you're right. Like if doing it for them, doing it for any other reason is going to get you in the door, great. But it's important to come to that realization as well that like we're worthy of this, we deserve it. And showing up as your best self, like is a blessing for you and for everyone around you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I could preach that all day.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about like the goal side of this now. So how do you feel like setting fitness goals postpartum? How do you feel like that can help a working mom specifically achieve, personal, professional success? Like how does it correlate to other goals in their lives?
Yeah, I love that question. I think that, something that we notice in the gym is consistent strength training. I'm going to use strength training as an example, but whether that's training for a race or training for, a triathlon or whatever it may be, this still translates. Like when you consistently show up for yourself and you start to see progress, you start to see whether that's external progress, meaning, your pants are fitting better or whatever it may be. For us in the gym, it's, oh, like I'm squatting way more than I used to be able to squat. Like, oh, like we're doing test week and I just PR'd my deadlift by 10 pounds, or I just PR'd my bench press by 10 pounds. Like that feeling of like, whoa, like I did that. Like I'm getting stronger, really does translate into everything else in your life. It's like, I use the analogy of like, oh, like now we get to open the pickle jar on our own. We don't need help for that. Like we don't need help putting our suitcase in the overhead bin. We can walk in our boss's office and have a tough conversation because I know how physically strong I am. I can lean into my emotions. I can start my own business. I can do all of these other things when I realize what I am physically capable of. It's just that gateway that starts to like translate differently. Maybe we've seen women start their own businesses. We've seen women, leave toxic relationships, like all of those things. It's not necessarily even the outcome itself. It's that they've bought into themselves consistently. And all of a sudden there's like a tangible result to that, like something that they can actually see, feel, breathe, touch, like experience. And now, they have truly like changed themselves like deeply on like a DNA biological level and realized what they're capable of. Like for me personally, like the thing I relate to most in that experience is birth. Like when I gave birth to my third son naturally, like without medication, like it was like biologically changing. Like I became a completely different person because I know what I'm capable of now. So it just has so many different benefits and translations.
God, I love that so much. I got so many full body chills when you were telling me all those examples. And I agree. When I developed the journal planner a few years ago, Word to Your Mother, I made sure that each and every day there was an area where you needed to focus on your physical, mental, and emotional well-being. Like what are 3 things you've done to hit all those check marks, right? And when you were saying that, I think it's so true. Like these things all correlate with each other. When you feel your best, you do your best. Like you're more confident, you're more motivated, you're more productive in all these spaces. And I think this trifecta, in my opinion, I mean, I know that maybe the physical needs to lead, but the trifecta of the three is like unstoppable.
And I don't know if necessarily the physical always has to lead. I think that whatever works for you, whatever gets you, if having that emotional space is what's going to motivate you to move physically, we just know, like, historically speaking, like, movement has profound emotional and mental benefits, right? Like, even in ancient times, like, the act of moving our body in a way was like something, the way that we celebrated, the way that we experience God, the way that we experience like all of these things was through movement. And so it usually starts to like translate into like that emotional and mental spaces. But yeah, like I think that whatever helps you. But I agree that like that trifecta is so important, and they all like help each other and need to help each other. And when one is out of balance, they're all kind of out of balance.
Yeah, so true. All right, Stacy, we're going to pop into our lightning round in a sec. But before we do, any final words you want to share with our listeners, especially those who find themselves maybe in a season of motherhood where like they'd really like to prioritize their fitness, but they're finding it so challenging to do so?
I think that's so many women in so many different stages of life. It truly.
Agree.
I think that the biggest thing that I would say for a woman in this stage of life is, yes, like you want to do what you enjoy. So if you're not enjoying the movement modality that you're doing, you're not going to probably do it. Like if you hate running, stop running. If you hate spinning, stop spinning. If you hate yoga, stop doing yoga. Like there is no amount of like continuing to do something you hate that's going to necessarily always make you love it. So that's first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is just being in a place mentally and emotionally where you can really lean into what does my body need? What do I need? And finding fitness professionals and resources that are going to intentionally guide you in a way that will match your physiology. So what I mean by that is the way you exercise in perimenopause and menopause should look different than the way that you exercise in your 20s. The way that you exercise while you're pregnant should look different than the way you exercise when you're postpartum. The way you exercise as an athlete should look different than just your everyday, like weekend warrior, weekly worker outer. So being able to, I think, know that when you're showing up for the gym, that you're maximizing, obviously, like we talked about the strength training process, but you're maximizing your physiology with the stimulus that you're doing and feeling supported by the stimulus that you're doing, meaning like it matches and it's going to gain the results in the more efficient and supportive way. It's not going to wreck my hormones in the future. It's not going to, decrease my muscle stores. It's not going to cause any like hip or knee issues in the future. I think that that's probably like one of the best ways that you can know and really invest in yourself in a way that like it's not a punishment. It's a training opportunity to support you as a unique individual and as a unique woman. And I think that just makes it easier to show up. It just makes it easier to continue to show up for yourself in that way.
Makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Are you ready for this? Just some
Okay, I'm
random
ready.
fun questions.
I'm
Okay,
ready.
here we go. What is your guilty pleasure TV show?
Currently, it's Grey's Anatomy.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Yep.
Yeah. What if you could go on vacation tomorrow anywhere in the world? Where would it be and why?
Ooh, I would go to anywhere in Europe. I'm going to say Rome, or just anywhere in that area. I'm a huge historical nerd, so I would say anything in that area where I could see like all the things and where people used to live and all that.
Yeah, Rome is like probably my favorite city in the whole world. It is so
Really?
magical. Yeah.
Oh, I just think to see the Colosseum and like see all, like I just think it would be absolutely incredible. I've never been, so
Yeah. Yeah, it is. If you could only eat one food for the rest of your life, what would it be? Calories don't count.
bread, all the bread, anything bread.
Such a good answer. All
Yep.
right. Finally, what is something most people don't know about you?
Oh, I feel like this is a question that people ask all the time. And then I'm always like, I don't know. I feel like I'm an open book. Okay. I lived in Toronto, Canada for 2 years. So I have experienced like multicultural living. I know Canada is a little bit close to the US, but yeah, I lived in Toronto, Canada for 2 years when I was younger, and it was an amazing experience. It's a cool city. Absolutely recommend it.
Very cool. Yeah. All right. Well, before we wrap up officially, please tell our listeners where they can find you, learn more about Victress Movement.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again for having me. Victress is, like I said, we were founded in Lincoln, Nebraska. So we have a local location here, but we are expanding nationwide currently. So you can find us at victressmovement.com. MVMT is the movement side. So Victress, VICTRESS, MVMT.com, as well as Victress Movement on Instagram. I believe there's a TikTok out there. I know there's Facebook for sure too. But again, Victress MVMT on Instagram. And then really like you can find me at Coach Stacy MVMT as well. Stacy is STACY. And then our local location here in Lincoln, that's definitely our most robust social media content platform. And that is Victress LNK. So LN is in Nancy K for Lincoln, Nebraska.
Awesome. Well, Stacy, thank you so much. This was super helpful, super informative, and I know it is going to be very impactful for our listeners, especially the mamas who are expecting or who are in that postpartum season right now.
Yes, well, thank you for having me. And if for anybody in that stage of life, just hold on. Just hold on. It does get better, but honor the process. That's for sure.